Well, hello, my name is Emmet Dooley. I'm from SPUC, Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, and today's topic is on overpopulation. I have a big question for you. Is the world overpopulated in any way? So let's have a wee look at this, because many people are deeply concerned about overpopulation today. Here's one of them. His name is Thanos, the big bad of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel's multi-million-dollar, movie investment climax, where he, Thanos, the big bad, snapped his finger and wiped out half the population of the universe because he felt the other half would thrive with half of the population gone. And you know, okay, Thanos, he's a imaginary character. It's a comic book. It's superhero stuff. But there are actually real people who are deeply concerned about overpopulation. And here's one of them.
First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
So, and what Bill Gates is talking about there, increased reproductive services, what he's actually talking about is abortion, increasing the availability of abortion in third world countries, especially in Africa. Mary Stopes clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics are actually illegal in these African nations. Also, they talk about is like increasing the availability of the DIY abortion pills. They're just handed out over the counter to African girls, and there's no checks and balances, and there's no aftercare, and it can get so messy. He was saying, let's decrease the population by 15%. Maybe he's talking about the 7 billion people that are already here. Let's look at that. So that would mean 1,050,000,000 people he is talking about. But that's a big number, especially if you compare it to the recent COVID deaths. So there has been 2.8 million people who have died of COVID or with COVID since the pandemic started. But that is only 0.25% of what Bill Gates is talking about. But maybe he was just talking about an increase of the 2.2 billion. He says, we're at 7 billion, we'll be up to 9.2 billion. Maybe just talking about 15% of that. And that would be 330 million, which is still a huge number. And but that's 0.82%. That's what COVID deaths have only matched up to 0.82% of that. These figures, you say we're throwing them out there, but it's when people are talking about such a dramatic decrease in population, there is a lot of people involved. But then you have other people as well of influence who are giving a lot of airtime about this topic.
Mass explosion tears through Russian bioweapons lab containing smallpox, Ebola and HIV virus, sparking major emergency.
That is absolutely wonderful, because as an environmentalist, I say to myself, the best possible news would be some mega emergency which got rid of huge chunks of the human race.
Do you have a sense of what the carrying capacity of Britain is, or of the world as a whole? Or?
Well, Britain, I put it at 10 or 15 million. I think it's complete nonsense that we are now confronted with an island, would you believe it, of 70 million.
Now we see the creation of a new massive class of useless people. As computers become better and better in more and more fields, there is a distinct possibility that computers will outperform us in most tasks and will make humans redundant. And then the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans for?
So with what Stanley Johnson said there, and Mr. Yuval from the World Economic Forum, this type of language and talking about people as if they don't really matter, or some people don't matter, this does have an effect. And we have seen this in some instances in society. Remember the terrible tragedy in New Zealand where a man went in and shot 49 Muslims as they prayed? Well, people at the start were saying, he's a crazy Christian or whatever, but actually he was an eco-fascist. The reason he targeted the Muslim population was he saw they were the one group that were having more children than anyone else. And the other reason he wanted to do this was he wanted to change the gun laws of New Zealand. So, and he actually did. He was arrested for his terrible crime. He was tried and convicted, but he's now sitting in some jail cell. And yes, he has decreased the population by those 49 lives. And he also got the gun laws changed in New Zealand. So it's kind of a bit creepy when you think of it. He's sitting there and he's like, he's won. It's like Thanos at the end of Infinity War. What he planned came about and he was successful in it. There was also a terrible shooting in El Paso, Texas, where I think just over 20 people were gunned down by another eco-fascist. These eco-fascists, they want to put the environment first before anyone else or any humans. These extremists, I'm sorry to say, are on the rise. But when we have this type of conversation or this language saying there's just too many people in the world and we need to dramatic decrease in the population for existential crisis, we're going to have many more of these kind of repeat attacks or other guys scheming like this. But let's just look, where did this whole overpopulation thing come from? When did it become mainstream? Well, back at the 1960, the population had just hit 3 billion people. Well, 3 billion people, there was a lot of predictions going on that the population growth was going to be too much. And one of the main guys behind this was a Stanford biologist, Paul Ehrlich. And he came up with a theory that in his book, The Population Bomb, he came up with a theory that seems to make a lot of sense mathematically, that the population growth was going so drastically, but that the food supply would not match up. So he predicted that once the population hit 6 billion people, we would have mass starvation and kind of like end of the world stuff was going to happen. And what he pretty much predicted, politicians ran with it. The book sold millions of copies, and they started changing policies. India, he said, he targeted India especially. He said India are so far gone that they will just, we might as well just forget about them, let them starve, because there's no hope for them. China adopted a one-child policy, so it was illegal for you to have a second child, and that second child could be terminated by state officials. Now that's not pro-life or pro-choice, but it's crazy what was going on. But also, we look at, India, they had forced sterilizations. You had China with the one-child policy, and many other countries adopted different policies around population control. But today the population is 7 billion people, and we haven't all starved. What happened? Well, this guy happened, Norman Borlaug. You might not have heard of him, but he's pretty much one of the most amazing human beings that's ever existed. Norman also was a biologist, but he used his gifts to make a strain of wheat that was up to 4 times more productive than any other wheat, even in the most harsh climates. He brought his wheat to India, and in a few short years, the wheat production went up so much that not only did India have enough wheat for themselves, but they're also exporting that wheat to other countries. In 1968, India launched a stamp that would celebrate the fact that they were now exporting more wheat and celebrating this fact. That stamp was released in the exact same year the Population Bomb book was released. Isn't that crazy? That Norman Borlaug's invention, his ingenuity, had solved the problem Ehrlich was already talking about and writing about, and the ink hadn't even dried in his book. But Ehrlich went on loads of television programs and he became mainstream, and nobody heard about Norman. But Norman was accredited for saving over 1 billion lives, and he was giving the Nobel Prize. It's like, imagine that, waking up in the morning and knowing that your work has saved over 1 billion people. I don't know, how could that even feel? So with Norman, you have the abundance mentality. With Paul Ehrlich, there was a scarcity mentality. So which one do you have? So let's just look at it. If the world is overpopulated, who is the first to be targeted? You might be thinking, oh, the unborn, the elderly, the disabled. But the first that are targeted are always girls. And we have this clip, it's an amazing clip I was shown as a documentary that just highlights the problem that girls face in this world that we live in today. The UN says that over 200 million girls are missing in this world. 200 million. So let's just have a look.
Today, India and China eliminate more girls than the number of girls born in America every year.
Genocide is the deliberate, systematic destruction of an ethnic or religious group. Gendercide is the deliberate, systematic destruction of a gender group, usually girls.
Why are Indian households secretly and brutally eliminating daughters from their family system?
They just wet the cloth and they fold it like this and they put it on the face. So the child can't breathe. Immediately the child will die.
But what this is an entire system, a social machinery that says we don't want females.
But the real problem started after I became pregnant. They started asking me for a sex determination. They wanted to know if the children are girls or boys. They started torturing me to get an abortion done. What should I do to save my daughters?
कि उसके सिर हिला के देखा तो वो तो यहाँ पे गले पे पूरा निशान पड़ा हुआ है। निशान पड़ने के बाद तब हमें फिर रोना पीटना, हमारे तो होश ही उड़ गए थे लड़की को देख के कि इसने मार कैसे दी।
后来那个男人就跑到那个窗户，那个窗户是打开的嘛，跑到那个他就看了一下，我就坐在那个门底下，他没看到我。如果是看到我的话，连我也一起带去，但是带去肯定是又要罚款，又要叫我把那个小孩子反正照掉。
மனசில் அது வச்சிருக்கக்கூடாது. பையனாக இருந்தால் வச்சுக்கலாம், பெண்ணாக இருந்தால் ஒழிச்சு பண்ணலாம். அப்படி இப்படி பிடிச்சா தேர்ந்து போச்சு. பிறந்த உடனே நானே பாசிபிடுவேன். மறுபடி பையனே இல்லை அப்படின்னு 8 குழந்தைங்களாட்டம் கொண்டு விட்டோம்.
So yes, there's a lot, it's a harrowing look of the reality faced by many girls, many females throughout this world, especially in places like India and China, where there are actually 72 million more men than women in India and China. Imagine that, 72 million, that's a huge number. But you see, a few news articles have been appearing kind of like this, mothers have 216 boys but no girls in Indian villages. Like that's, like, on average, if you look at, pull up Google for any country, the difference between the birth rate of boys and girls in any country should be 0.1% difference. That's just, it's always 50-50. But in places like India or China, you see there's a much greater imbalance. Why is that? Well, it's because of forced abortion, infanticide, and just murder. It's terrible. But at least a few news articles are starting to break, and this problem is being highlighted more and more about sex-selective abortions. But this is something we need to face with education, increase education and awareness that this is just not acceptable in any humane society. But I said there's 72 million more men than women in China and India. Let's just have a wee look at that for a second. If you look here at this map of the United Kingdom and Ireland, like you have Ireland, there's 4.9 million people. Scotland, 5.4 million. Northern Ireland, 1.8. And Wales has 3.1 million people. And in England, there's 55 million. That entire number adds up to not even 72 million people. But could you imagine all of Ireland, England, Wales, and Scotland, just men? What a bloody mess. It's crazy. Like, you know, this, and even for the students I speak to, you know, they're thinking, like, imagine if your whole town was just men. It just doesn't make sense. You know, this wasn't the plan. But anyway, so also girls are targeted. Yes, we know that now. But what other groups are targeted? Well, the second most targeted group would be Africans. So I'm going to refer to two studies here when it comes to Africa. And I would ask you should look up Strings Attached, a fantastic documentary by Uju Ikocha, Culture of Life Africa, and it shows exactly, you know, where all this funding goes in African countries. But the first study, it was done by a Japanese engineer, his name Nakurawa, and he autographed this autographed world map because the atlas we have on our walls in our schools is a bit misleading. You know, because Africa is a lot bigger than what we think, or what is shown on those maps, from the viewpoint of those maps. So as we look here at his autograph map, you see the vast expanse of Africa compared to how small Europe is, and North America and Canada. And so also another study backed this up by Kay Krause. And Kay Krause was able to fit all of America, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, China, India, Japan. It was able to fit all these countries into the landmass of Africa. And he added up all those populations there, as you can see them. And the exact number, the total number of all the populations of all those countries is 3.694 billion people. Like, that's a lot of people. But how many people are actually living in Africa right now, today? I always get very strange answers on this one. Oh, there's 4 billion, 5 billion. But the fact is, it's just over 1 billion people are living in Africa today. But hold on, why is all this money being spent in Africa on overpopulation policies? If you look here at this ODA, the Official Development Assistance graph, you can just look this up on Google as well. As you see here, there was education. If you're trying to help a country, of course you spend most of the money on education. You know, if you want a person who's hungry, you could just give them a fish. But if you give them a fishing rod and teach them how to fish, then you empower them, and they can then look after themselves and their family for future generations. Education is always the way to go. And back in the noughties, you see here in this graph, yeah, most money was being spent on education. But now, less and less. Education is second from bottom in that graph. And see, the overpopulation money is right at the top now. So if you just look here, what are these population programs that we're looking at in this graph? Well, pretty much it is abortion availability. Taxpayers' money being used to set up illegal abortion facilities all across these African nations. Planned Parenthood International, Mary Stopes International, and also increasing the availability of these DIY abortion pills that are just handed out to girls, African girls across the nation, with no aftercare, with no follow-up, with no consultation with any medical staff. And this is really a dangerous practice. But again, look up No Strings Attached and you'll see the reality that so many African women are being faced with and being preyed upon by these overpopulation policies. Africa is unique in this. No other continent or country is more money spent on, most money is spent on population control. Africa is unique in that sense. But why is that? If you look here, you have 36.4 people per square kilometre in all of Africa. Look in our part of Europe, 72.9 people per square kilometre. That doesn't make sense. why is all this money being, say, used in Africa to control the population when there's more people living in Europe per square kilometre? Let's look at Europe a bit more closely at some of the countries. What's actually going on in Europe right now? Well, look, in Russia, Putin is going crazy. He wants to have more babies. He actually had to go home from work early and make a baby day in Russia. You can look it up. And and also there's also, sadly to say, there's a no abortion day in Russia because their abortion rates are through the roof. They're the highest in Europe. And and they just have a day where they try and discourage abortion on that day. It's a very sad reality to look at. Let's also look at in Hungary. If you have 4 more children in Hungary, you pay 0 income tax. Like, imagine all that income tax you see coming out of your wages every month. Imagine all of that going back into your back pocket for the rest of your life. That might move to Hungary. Then in Italy, if you have 3 or more children, you get free farmland. There you go. I've got 3 kids. I want to move to Italy, grow some potatoes. It looks good. And there's other countries like Romania. If you have no children, you pay higher tax. In Denmark and in some of the Scandinavian countries, very strange adverts there. You can look them up yourselves on YouTube. That if you can prove you had conceived a child on a foreign trip or that you can actually claim the money back and get nappies and baby products for a whole year for free. It's some really strange policies, but a lot of these countries are becoming more and more inventive on how they can boost their population. More closer to home, let's look here at Scotland. Scotland, you always hear Scotland wanting to have independence from England and whatever. I don't know. Maybe they want to move to Jamaica or the Caribbean or something. But in Scotland, there was a study done. The Treasurer came up and says there's actually, for Scotland to be self-sustaining, for Scotland to be independent, they have to have 500,000 immigrants, just like myself, to come into the country and bolster the economy. 500,000. That's an interesting number there, Mr. Treasurer. You don't know how interesting it is, because since the Abortion Act in 1967, there has been exactly 500,000 abortions that happened in Scotland. You're telling me there's 500,000 people missing? I think I know where they went. It's a very strange coincidence, but I think God doesn't make mistakes, doesn't make rubbish. Everybody has a purpose. I love that Forrest Gump. What's my destiny, Mama? Well, Forrest. Everyone has a destiny. Everyone has a purpose. Imagine if Norman Borlaug was aborted. He wouldn't have been around here to save 1 billion lives with his ingenuity. Each one of us is a gift. But let's just do some math. I love just doing math. I wasn't really good at it in school, but my wife's a math teacher, so she helps. Here we have the state of Texas. So Texas is a big place, but it's only one of 50 states in America. Now, if we look at this, there are 7 billion people, say, in the world, right? Divide that by 4, and we get 1.75 billion families of 4. Okay, so now, in Texas, there are 7.488 trillion square feet. So let's divide that square footage by the families, and we get 4,279 square feet per family of 4. And the average size of a UK house is 915 square feet. So therefore, everybody in the whole world could live inside the family of 4 in Texas and have more square footage than the average household here in the UK. Isn't that crazy? Texas is a big place. It's only a small part of this ginormous world that we live in. And I think that really strikes home when you see how big this world is. So the next time you hear some, elite politician like Al Gore here, he said, the North Pole will be ice-free in the summer of 2013 because of man-made global warming. Well, as you can see there, my answer in 2021, nope, it's still cold, So, another one, I love this one. In Montana National Park, they were forced to change the sign. They had a sign up for about 20 or 30 years. By the year 2020, these glaciers would be gone. bye-bye to the glaciers. But they've had to change that sign now because the glaciers are still there. And you can go and see them yourselves in Montana, minus the sign. They had to remove that. Oh, and the next time you hear Obama talking about and lecturing about the next existential crisis of water levels rising and the polar ice caps melting, remember in 2019 in Martha's Vineyard, he bought this plush mansion for $11.75 million. You know, so that if the water levels are really rising there, Obama, I think that's a poor investment. Also, just be careful who you listen to. What expert, what billionaire do you listen to? Here we have Elon Musk and Jack May. They both agree the biggest problem the world will face is population collapse. Now, again, which billionaire are you going to listen to? Which biologist do you want to follow? Ehrlich or Norman Borlaug? Is there an abundance in this world, or is there a scarcity mentality? Let you decide.